Another day, another story. Hello, my dear viewers, this is Sorry What We're Your Favorite Storyteller. Jason is here to give you another nail-biting story. We have a two-part story today, dear viewers, but don't worry because both parts will be equally satisfying. Now, strap yourself in because we're diving right into the drama. I looked in the mirror of our plush double sink and sighed. What I saw, I was fairly happy with. Married for 20 years to a beautiful woman whom I absolutely adored, one magnificent daughter of whom I was extremely proud, an income which ensured financial security until retirement and beyond, and a body, mine, which was in great working order, for 43-year-old. I was in a comfortable zone of existence, the likes of which I knew many men dreamed about. Yep, I was one of the lucky ones. Well, as long as you count the horrendous hours spent at work to secure our income. And, let's not forget the long arduous, but ultimately fulfilling, time spent wooing the woman of my dreams. And, the nightmarish nights of baby watch as our daughter went from a very sick 1-year-old to a precocious teenager, to a settled woman at college, studying to be a doctor. Yep, luck played a part, but the major input to our success was simply hard work and commitment. Rachel, my wife, never worked since our daughter Megan was born. That was simply bad luck as Megan was a sickly child, demanding almost full-time attention from both Rachel and myself. Rachel was a qualified architect, but never actually realized the dream of working in that field, because of her commitment to rearing our daughter. I often felt sad for her in this regard. I met her when we were both in our second years of our respective courses. As we were studying, her in the design and architecture faculty, and me in engineering, she always talked of designing the perfect buildings. It was a passion with her, hence my sadness for her. She, however, never even hinted that she felt that loss. Being the determined person that she was, she just buckled down and did what needed to be done. My name is Tom. Tom Wildthorpe, and I earn my income by troubleshooting engineering problems in power plants around the country. This does involve a fair bit of unexpected travel, and has done for nearly all of our married life. I could have opted for the stay-in-office positions, but Rachel and I discussed the fact that the extra income would make our financial life much easier. Fortunately, Rachel adjusted to this expectation early on in our married life, and never once switched about my absences, although I always felt as guilty as hell, taking off at a moment's notice. I was rarely gone for more than 2 nights, so I made sure that she understood my undying love for her, and my deep gratitude for her willingness to step up while I was away. My golden rule was always that if I was away for 1 night, I would organize a 1-night date night to make up. The formula was the same for 2 nights, or 3 nights. 2 nights away meant 2 date nights, etc. Luckily, my parents and hers were within 20 minutes drive from our house, so babysitting was no problem. I returned to the image in the mirror. I was a very satisfied man. I shaved, as I always do when I get home. Of course, I have a travel shave kit in my go bag, but it never quite gets the closeness and smoothness as a good shave gets. Rachel loves it when I shave. She knows that I do it just for her. Nothing annoys her more than when I go down on her with bristles on my chin. A smoother shave guarantees at least 3 Aus for her before we actually get down to it. No annoying prickly chin for her lady bits. My entrance into the kitchen was greeted by a huge hug and kiss. They both oozed the promise of a busy night ahead. "You owe me a night out, Buster," Rachel cooed, as she lovingly ran her fingertips over my cleanly shaven chin. "Can I pick the place this time?" "Anything for you, babe," I replied as I returned her hug and smiled. Our eyes met and I knew how much I loved this woman. I would end anyone for her. Hell, I would give my life for her. Our lifestyle sometimes sucked, but we seemed to come out on top every time. As expected, we connected during our date night, and satisfied our sexual urges later that night. Since our daughter had left home, we reveled in the freedom to be uninhibited in our love-making. We made love anywhere in the house. We made as much noise as we wanted. It was a freedom which we loved, especially after our challenging early child-rearing years. Not that they weren't rewarding. We wouldn't trade our time with our daughter for anything. But, it was a fair restraint on our love life. We both loved our daughter Megan. She was the completion of our marriage. There is no feeling like seeing this small defenseless human being who is completely reliant on the love and care of their parents grow and develop. I did worry a lot about her as she was going through her hormonal early teens, but Rachel seemed to have an understanding with her. I am sometimes jealous of the almost secret bond between a mother and daughter, but Megan always made it known that I was her special dad. Rachel looked sideways at her when Megan said that, and at those times I could read the silent body language between them. Megan would always hug me then and say, "I love you, Dad," something that always melted my heart. The moment, as always happened, faded to another topic, but the warm memory was banked into my subconsciousness. Life went on, as it does. It was not much longer than 3 weeks later that I was again called out to a 2-day stint in the north. I hated these. It was normally freezing cold and took forever to fly in and out. There were often long, boring waits in freezing cold airports, waiting for connecting flights to get back home. After performing my duties, solving the engineering challenges and writing copious reports, I was pissed. The endless wait in a cold staging area just added to my angst. Arriving home, cold, pissed and tired, I did my usual. I kissed and hugged my wife and immediately went to my ensuite and showered. Believe me, a long hot shower does wonders for mood adjustment. Feeling somewhat normal again, I stared at the mirror to begin my close shave routine. That's when I saw it. What could I possibly see in my ensuite that would shatter my perfect existence? A small hair. A small black hair which was lodged between the sink tap on my side of the ensuite sinks and the white splashback tiles. I noticed things. That's how I get my job done so well. Over the years I have developed a habit and quite a knack of noticing small details. The ones normally overlooked are the ones that cause the trouble. I'm not OCD about this habit, but I know it helps in my line of work. I don't have black hairs. Not even down there. That is a legacy of my Dutch heritage. All, and I mean all of my hair was a very light brown in color. Could it be Rachel's? No. She is of Danish origin, and all of her hair is that beautiful golden blonde. All of it. Got it. Could it be Megan's? Had she come home while I was away? Anyway, why would she use our ensuite? She always used the main bathroom downstairs. Megan started off life with pitch black hair, but before she was 1 year old, her hair resembled Rachel's. There was a goth stage that she went through as an early teenager. Ugh, don't I remember those years. It was a trying time for myself and Rachel. Megan often treated me with disdain and Rachel with downright rudeness. All my friends just told me to wait out the crazy years and hope she becomes human again in the near future. She did, luckily. She switched almost overnight to a once again decent human being, one where she treated me with extra respect and obvious love. Her relationship with Rachel still seemed standoffish, however. During the goth times, as Rachel and I called them, Megan had pitch black hair along with all of the other cliché goth accessories. Even now she has kept her hair black. It could be her hair in my sink area, but it was extremely unlikely. Back to the problem at hand. My mind went into overdrive, something it was used to doing. I did it every day. It was my job to get to the nitty-gritty of a problem and find solutions. Fast. Perhaps it was because of my shitty experience at this last gig which pushed my mood to a negative paradigm. I looked at a fairly normal small detail, and immediately imagined the worst. It was only a small discrepancy in my normal existence. Get a grip. My rational mind screamed at me. It is not a major problem. But this was very different. This problem was with our marriage, probably. It did seem like a quantum leap to go from one stray hair to marriage destruction, but unless and until another explanation could be found, there it was. How did the hair get there? It had obviously been cut, because it was of uniform thickness for all of its length. It didn't taper off to a thin point. Could it have been shaved? Maybe cut with scissors. I checked my side of the vanity cupboards. Sure enough, there was all my shaving kit. Blades, cream, scissors, etc. were all there. Now I had to wonder if someone else was using them while I was away. This needed investigation. I carefully arranged my kit so that I could easily work out if it had been used. Rachel would never use my kit as she prefers those lady shavers, which are supposed to be smoother and of course, much more colorful. Part of me wanted to laugh it all off and forget about it. Another, steadily growing part, wanted to get to the bottom of this anomaly before it ate completely into our happy existence. I have to be wrong. I continually told myself. The next couple of weeks were a surreal existence for me. I was always questioning everything I saw and heard and felt. Paranoia reigned supreme. I found that I was checking my shave kit every day and searching for any more hairs every chance I got. My kit always went back exactly the same way after I used it. Every small disagreement was micro-analyzed for any hints. Even when we made love, I was on the lookout for unusual or fake responses. If Rachel went out, I analyzed where she went, for how long, and if it was possible that she was doing something else instead. It was certainly not a happy time for me. I thought that I hated well, being used to being a poker-faced operator in my line of work. I knew I could pull it off at work easily, but having to do it continually at home as well caused my stress levels to shoot through the roof. Something had to give. To add to my woes, I had a short one-night call-out midweek the next week. As usual, the return routine was followed except for one detail. I checked for hairs first, then checked my shave kit. What the duck? I whispered unbelievably. There were no hairs, but my kit had obviously been used. It was not in the exact place that I had left it. Someone had used it while I was away. Now I was really pissed. What the hell was going on here? My mind couldn't get around the implications of this revelation. I was hoping beyond hope that what the evidence pointed to wasn't right. Again, as usual, I shaved, showered and went downstairs. One great thing about routines is that they can be performed without complete conscious thought. I floated, as if in a dream. My hearing was tunnel hearing. My ears heard, but I wasn't listening to anything. Nothing actually registered. Rachel noticed my short mood and commented on it. "Babe, you've been working too hard. I've never seen you so stressed. Is there anything I can do?" And there was that mischievous look which never failed to let me know exactly what she was thinking. Usually a session of lovemaking. Now normally that sort of invitation didn't go unanswered with that certain glint in the eye and a loving touch, but this time I just blurted out that I needed some time off. The job was getting to me. Rachel said she understood and even suggested that I take a couple of days to relax by myself. She even had a place in mind. It was a small B&B about 3 hours drive away, by beach. We had often talked about going there together for a weekend, but never seemed to get the time. "It will do you the world of good," she said. "I love you so much and want you to go and recharge." My mind immediately saw the suggestion for what my paranoia-fueled psyche viewed it as. It was a chance for her to do what she was doing while I was away at other times. I seemingly reluctantly agreed that I would as soon as I could arrange it with work. Well, that happened 2 weeks later. My work team was way ahead on its projects and were all given 3 days as toil, time off in lieu. I packed my car, some clothes and a collection of books and headed off. Rachel tried to kill me with kindness just before I left, but was quite restrained in the sex department. Again my paranoia went into overdrive. As I drove out of our street, she waved from our front garden, and I thought about turning around and confessing what I suspected, so that she could explain what I had seen and put my fears to rest once and for all. But I had to know. It was part of my DNA. My Dutch heritage again came to the fore. My father always called me kaskop, a Dutch slang word for stubborn. Literally, it translated to cheesehead. You may have seen the large round, red cheese balls paraded for tourists at the Alkmaar cheese markets. If you have, then you know them as tough, resilient lumps of wax-covered cheese, which can take quite a few hard knocks. I needed to have the facts before I took this any further. If I was mistaken, life would go on, and I would have to clear my mind of all of the negative and worst-case scenarios that had crowded it of late. My trust for Rachel had been depleted to such an extent that I could not go on at that rate. If, however, I was correct, then it would be hell to pay. Infidelity was one evil that both Rachel and I had discussed very early on in our relationship. We both agreed that it was a one-and-done deal. I took that commitment quite seriously, but I was beginning to hope that Rachel did as well. My drive away was to be a short one. I had arranged to leave my car at a mechanic's shop not more than 4 kilometers away, ostensibly to get a thorough service and checkup. I explained to Mr. Wiles, the mechanic, that he could have the car for 3 days, so to do a thorough job. He was not to contact me about any possible faults, as I would give him carte blanche to do what was needed, and that I would pick it up and settle the bill at the end of the 3 days. I could see his money brain ticking behind his eyes. This was a cash cow job. He didn't get too many of these. Usually it was a long queue of irate clients arguing about every expense detail on the bill. He would find every fault, no matter how small, and charge me accordingly. The dollar signs beckoned him. From there it was only a short walk to the car rental agency where I rented a small, white sedan. It was the most nondescript vehicle available. These cars were practically invisible in the flood of other equally unexciting white vehicles on the road. It was this car that I drove back to our neighborhood. I had spent quite a while working out where I could set up surveillance of my house. We do have quite a few retired couples living in our street. As pleasant as these people are, they often have heaps of time to kill, so spend a lot of it being what can only be described as busybodies. Nothing gets past their inquisitive eyes. These people had to be avoided at all costs. Luckily, there was a small alcove of trees and bush, which hid the vacant block behind it from most people's view. That is where I chose to go. I made a point of not hanging out there full time, however. I only stayed there in short bursts. To simply stay there all the time would have appeared creepy and surely aroused suspicion. As it was, I didn't really feel comfortable acting like a neighborhood peeping Tom. My time on watch was not wasted. It was not more than 2 hours after I started my watch that I saw Rachel's car leave. I immediately phoned her. I could see that she glanced down at the phone and pulled over. The engine was switched off before she picked up the phone and answered. "Hi Rach. Just thought I would phone my favorite wife. How's everything going? Missing me yet?" "Hi babe. I was just thinking about you. What's this about favorite wife? Do you have another, not so favorite one? Hey, have you arrived yet? Of course you have. Are you settled in? Please use this time to really unwind love, so that whatever it was that was driving you around the bend sorts itself out." She really was acting like my loving wife, concerned for my welfare and feelings. I must admit that at that moment, I felt like a real idiot. How could I be doing what I was and thinking those thoughts about my wife, my lifelong partner? Thanks for that, Rachel. I really appreciate this time. What are you up to at the moment? Oh, not much really. I'm just sitting around reading while the washing is on. You know, usual boring stuff. I think I will be stuck here at home all day just catching up. I have to go home. The washing is nearly through its cycle. I will call you tonight. Bye, babe. Love you heaps. Okay. Bye, Ratch. Talk to you tonight. Why did she lie? If she was going somewhere in the car, she could have said it honestly. It was no skin off my nose if she said she was going on some errand or other. This started to stink. I discreetly followed her. She went to the local shopping center, but didn't get out. It looked as if she was waiting for someone. I did notice her on the phone as soon as she parked. Now why would she do that? My mind again turned in ever-decreasing circles, focusing on the distinct possibility that all was not as it seemed in the Wildthorpe marriage. I didn't want to believe it. Even as the evidence was mounting up, I was looking for a million reasons why it would not be so. It was indeed so. Not more than 2 minutes after parking, a man entered Rachel's car. If it wasn't for the immediate passionate kiss which followed, I would still have believed that this rendezvous was innocent. It wasn't innocent. This intimate act was familiar to both of them. It wasn't a one-off tentative, shy coupling. It was an act performed with the practice and grace of two lovers absolutely at ease with their closeness. That's when I vomited. I couldn't help it. There were no usual warning signs. No cramping stomach. No clamminess on my skin. No increased heart rate. Just straight out. Even in my distress, I had the thought of now I had to explain the mess and smell to the car hire. With swimming eyes and feeling faint, I noticed that Rachel and her père mère had driven off. I could only guess where to. I couldn't follow them in my state. To my great embarrassment, some other shoppers had seen my sickness and offered help. Stumbling out of the car, I tried to explain that I was okay, but you know some people are just too kind-hearted. I had to relent and accept their assistance. Wet towels and baby wipes appeared from nowhere. I was rubbed, wiped and cleaned by a myriad of hands. It amazed me that the kindness of some people soon had me cleaned up, and my car was even in some semblance of cleanliness as well. The lingering smell on me and in the car would take time to disappear, however. I thought about heading straight to the hotel room which I had organized, but I just had to know. I didn't know exactly where they were going, but judging by the evidence in my ensuite, I could have a good guess. The drive back to our neighborhood seemed to take forever. With the windows all open for obvious reasons, I was very worried that someone would recognize me as I parked in the bushy alcove, but no one seemed to be out and about. My eyes grew dry, even with the tears that had been shed. My mouth was parched and still tasted of the acrid aftermath of my episode, but I stayed where I was. Just to be 100% sure. They were in the house for about 4 hours. 4 hours of hell for me, but no doubt 4 hours of heaven for them. 4 hours and then they both exited the house quickly. Rachel had parked in the garage as soon as she arrived home, and now, after 4 hours she was leaving again. The man with Rachel had positioned himself so that he could not be seen by any casual observers, but I was definitely not one of those. The top of his head, especially his pitch black hair, was just visible above the dashboard. As if on autopilot, I again followed them back to the shopping center, where, after another long kiss, he got out. Rachel drove off. The bastard then walked casually to another parked car, and he drove off as well. My stupor was replaced by anger, an anger I had not felt since primary school when the schoolyard bully decided that it was my turn to donate my lunch to him. He was a huge kid, much bigger than me, and walked around with an attitude that he could do as he pleased. While I always watched from a distance his standover antics, I nonetheless wished I was bigger and more confident to do something about him. So now it was my turn. "Give me your lunch, Tommy Tucker." "Ha. I like that. Give me your tucker, Tommy Tucker." With trembling voice, I replied, "No. Get your own. This is mine." He wasn't used to being refused and paused for a few seconds. He towered over me and shouted, "Give me your lunch now." The shouting is what made me angry. No one ever shouted in our house. I was not used to this level of ill feeling towards me. Later, when reflecting on this incident, I was always amazed by my lack of fear. It was just anger, a red raging anger. This lunch was mine. My mum had bought special chocolate sprinkles from the delicatessen just for my lunch. In Holland, it is a real treat to spread these on fresh bread and noodles of butter. I was actually really looking forward to today's lunch. It beat the usual Vegemite sandwiches. This time when I replied, it was with an almost detached, calm voice. Later, when recalling the incident, my classmates couldn't believe how calm and determined I acted. They said that they could see menace in my face. If only John, the bully, saw it in time. I said no. Get your own. He then tried to grab my hair, which was quite long then. I had seen him do this countless times to his other victims, so I knew what he planned. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. As his arm came out, I quickly stood up while extending my left arm, the non-lunge arm. I have big hands, another legacy of my Dutch heritage. My left hand bunched into a fist as I was rising. It connected with John's mouth and nose with all of my body's rising motion. The crunch I heard when it all connected is a sound I will never forget. John's eyes opened wide in shock, and his mouth moved soundlessly open and closed rhythmically, much like a fish. Then he collapsed. He was writhing around on the ground, groaning when I crouched down beside him. Again, with a calm, quiet voice, I said right into one of his ears, I said, "No, but if you really need lunch so badly, here it is." I bunched up my sandwiches, my delicious sandwiches, the lunch I was really looking forward to, and stuffed them into his now bleeding mouth. I don't think he could bite anything at that point, because I noticed a few loose teeth wobbling at the front of his mouth. I continued to rub and squash the sandwiches into his mouth, until a duty teacher pulled me off him. The cheers from the surrounding kids were so loud, I almost didn't hear what the teacher said. "Tom, what on earth has gotten into you? Into the office, now." The adrenaline wore off as I was marched back to face my doom. The office secretary saw me stagger in and only just caught me as I slumped down into bowling mess. I didn't understand at that young age the feeling of real anger. My life had always been cruisy, surrounded by calm and happy people. That anger was not experienced by me again in all those years until now. I followed this prick back to where he lived. He lived in quite a well-appointed house, not far from the shopping center in fact. The place was a mansion. The design was something out of home beautiful. Perfect roof lines, delicate color shadings and large imposing windows behind wide verandas made this house speak loudly one particular word to anyone who saw it. That word was wealth. The landscape gardens only added to this conversation. I took in his appearance now. He looked about the same age as Rachel and myself, with dark black hair and a very fit toned build. I would swear that he was of Mediterranean heritage because of this thick black hair and swarthy complexion. The clothes he wore were obviously quite expensive. They almost looked tailored. The way he swaggered out of his car to the front door of his house spoke of the arrogance of this bastard. I had met his type before on job sites around the country. They approached everything around them as if it was there just to please them. They often treated those around them with disdain. I had no time for entitled pricks like these, but there was a special hate reserved for this bastard. With a growing sense of dread, another detail entered my mind. I had seen it, but in my dulled state of thinking, it had not fully registered. When Rachel first picked him up, he had that one-day Mediterranean growth of black hair. I always laughingly called it the heiress look when I saw it on workers I came in contact with. When I saw him again, he was clean-shaven. "The ducker," I said aloud. "The dirty piece of pond scum. Now it all makes sense." I was about to exit the car and confront the ducker, pardon the pun, when a smartly dressed woman exited the front door. They seemed to know each other. How could I tell? Well, they gave each other a perfunctory kiss on the cheeks. He hastily retreated into the house while she pottered around in the front yard. She was soon joined by a mini-me version of herself, obviously her daughter. The daughter looked vaguely familiar. Another detail to sort out later. They spoke to each other and laughed a lot about some unheard incident. Time to leave. I knew all I needed to know. My meeting with this prick would have to happen later. Angry as I wasn't going to belt the sheet out of him in front of his wife and young daughter. Not only was my wife cheating on me with this loser, but he was also cheating on his own wife and daughter. What a lowlife. How can one human do things to other humans that they know will cause pain and hurt, especially when there was no history of ill feeling? I could never understand that, but I had an inkling that I was to find out what this experience was like. This ducker was going to pay. I had things to do. The time away was to be a blessing in disguise. I could do what needed to be done without having to make excuses at home. Unfortunately, the same pattern of behavior was followed by the two cheaters for each day that I was away. Now I didn't have to follow them everywhere. I knew what was happening. The usual list of pre-divorce cautions were attended to. Credit cards, superannuation beneficiaries changed, payroll deposits redirected, utility company details altered, phone plans cancelled. You know, all of the usual stuff. The plethora of web-based information and self-help sites was a huge help, but a sad indictment on the state of marriage in our world. I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. It was very strange how these lawyers described themselves as family lawyers, when the majority of their work resulted in the breakup of families. Go figure. Papers were prepared, but the service of them was delayed until I was ready. I arranged for a private investigator, on that first day, at some expense, because of the time-sensitive nature of my request, to fully document one day of Rachel's infidelity. I wanted documented evidence of the shady behavior displayed by these two. I also needed to speak with Megan. She was our daughter, and apart from myself and her mother, would be the other person most impacted by what I was about to do. I now wished I hadn't. If I thought that this situation was already bad and devastating to my marriage to Rachel, the destruction of our family unit, my self-esteem and worth as a husband, I was sorely mistaken. Hi Megan. We need to talk. It's about your mum and me, were the first words to exit my mouth as I entered her unit. This is not going to be pretty, so we better both sit down. Don't worry, it's not about you. It's about your mother and me. Dad, you look like shit. What's happened? Oh crap. You know, don't you? I'm sorry Dad, but it's not just about you and Mum. It does also involve me. At this point she dissolved into tears and hugged me tightly. She wouldn't let go as she continued trying to talk. Eventually I just had to return the hug and quieten her down until she could control her sobs. Megan, no. It's nothing to do with you. It will affect you, I mean us as a family, but it isn't your fault. Hush baby daughter. What I'm about to tell you is really only between myself and your mother. I have to tell you what is about to happen, so that you can be prepared for all the shit that is going to hit the fan soon. Nothing for you needs to change, except our family will look a little different in the future. This didn't calm her at all. If anything, it brought on new fits of sobbing and hugging. When she calmed again, she pulled slightly apart from me and looked at me with tear-filled red eyes. Dad, what I'm about to tell you is something that I have kept inside since I was a rebellious teenager. You remember the time I went completely off the rails? I could tell you were extremely worried about me, but I didn't care. I nodded and said, I sure do Megs. It was the most stressful time of our lives. Sorry Dad. There was a reason I went goth and all of the other stupid behaviors. It wasn't just normal teenage angst. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt you. I know. The knowledge hurt me incredibly for years. I think you'd better sit down. I'm going to get us each a strong drink. I was speechless. Here I was about to let my daughter know why I was divorcing her mother, and I get hit with the promise that what I am about to hear will be devastating. I sat and quietly waited. The long glass of bourbon was accepted unconsciously, as were the first 2 huge swallows of the burning liquid. Yes Dad. We do need to talk. We need to talk about me, and we need to talk about Mum. Mum first. You have obviously found out that Mum cheated on you many years ago. How old am I? Well, that many years ago plus 9 months. I was about to interrupt and clarify what I knew, but Megan shushed me and continued. When I was about 13, you know, hormones, boys, self-esteem, cruel girlfriends. Well, one of my witchy girlfriends kept on at me about how my skin color didn't quite match her mum's. This got to me. It got to me so much that I started to obsess about it. I coupled this with the fact that Mum always insisted that I dye my hair. What? I interrupted. What do you mean, dye your hair? This conversation was getting weirder and weirder. Mum always dyed my hair. She told me that she had been doing it since I was 1. I have seen the baby photos Dad. My hair is naturally pitch black. The pit of my stomach was feeling like it was getting deeper and deeper. I could feel my face becoming paler and that my blood pressure was dropping. No, surely not. Megan rescued me from falling in a complete faint by insisting I take 2 more swallows of my bourbon. The strong biting liquid settled me somewhat. Drink up Dad. There's more to come. I'm sorry. I really am. I need to tell you the truth. You don't know how much I have dreaded this moment since the day I found out myself. Drink up. There's plenty more of that here in this bottle. Dad, Mum had an affair. She had it with an old university friend after you guys were married. All I can say, Dad, bluntly, is that you weren't the sperm donor when I was conceived. Here she paused and refilled my glass. Luckily she immediately hugged me tightly and sobbed into my shoulder. That beautiful hug which I so loved during our happy times, now only resulted in a sopping wet shoulder, and feelings of utter emptiness and hopelessness. I am not sure who sobbed the most, but at that point I knew I could never feel lower than right then. Our mutual hug was probably the only thing keeping me in the present. Dad. I think I know how you're feeling, but I need you to know that I love you more than anything. You are my dad. You always have been my dad, and you always will be no matter where my DNA comes from. Don't you remember that I always called you my special dad? That's because you are and always have been. Way back then, I kept annoying Mum about my concerns until finally, once when you were away, she confessed to me about her affair with Deckhead. My eyes met hers at this derogatory name for her biological father. Yes Dad. That is what he will always be to me. To me, he will always be that Deckhead. The one that shot his cheating sperm into Mum and attacked her fertile egg until I was conceived. That is how I have rationalized the fact of my conception. You are my father, not him. I met him once. I think Mum arranged it, pretending to be accidental. By that time I was in my goth stage. I think the whole weird behavior thing was brought on by my feelings of insecurity and disgust at what Mum had done. I even hated you for a while, thinking that you must have been some sort of wimp for allowing Mum to stray like that. Eventually, I realized that you didn't know, and I replaced the feeling of anger at you with one of love and sadness. I determined to make your relationship with me a loving one, as it should be. I have never really forgiven Mum. Anyway, I looked at Deckhad and he looked at me. I could see that he wasn't impressed with what he saw. I mean, nothing scares a man more than seeing a black-haired, pale-skinned, skinny teenage girl wearing black leather pants, jacket, silver chain anklets, bracelets, black mascara eyeshadow. I think you get the picture. Mum had tried to make me dress differently, but you know me at that stage. It wasn't happening. His sneer while he said to Mum, "What a disappointment," never left his face. I remember looking back with just as much attitude and replying to him, "But also Mum, scumbag. You're nothing but a cheating scumbag who hangs out with bores. You couldn't get your own girlfriend, probably because you're such an asshole, so you preyed on married women. Ones that wanted to act like bores and sluts in secret from their husbands." He took off in a huff, and Mum bundled me back into the car. She let me have it all the way back home. She told me in no uncertain terms what would happen to our family if I ever told you, or even hinted to you about what I knew. We would be a split family living on the breadline. I wouldn't get to see you because she would make sure of that through the courts. My life would be miserable. I'm sorry, Dad, but my teenage brain couldn't handle that level of responsibility. I decided to do as Mum wished and not say a word. Megan again got a twinkle in her eye and continued, "But I always called you my special dad after that." I could see that it got straight to your heart, that title. Mum hated it and always looked at me strangely when I said it. Little old rebellious me had found a way to stick it to Mum, while keeping my promise to her and at the same time giving you some of the love and respect you deserved. Drink up, Dad. You have survived the great reveal, now we need to talk about what is going to happen. Megan, I came here to tell you that I will be divorcing your Mum. Everything is already set in motion. I just didn't want it to come out of the blue for you. After what you have told me, a great many things make sense. I had no idea that you weren't my biological daughter. No. Please don't get me wrong, Megs. You're always my daughter, and to hear what you have had to carry for so long, and how you handled it, makes me even more proud of you than I already was. My heart is bursting right now. The feelings of pain, hurt, betrayal, anger, emptiness and despair are, luckily, balanced by the love you have shown me as your father. We again hugged tightly and mutually felt that love and togetherness that was the measure of our relationship as father and daughter. But Megan, dear Megs, now you need to have a drink. I handed her glass. Drink, Megs. There's more. I have recently found out that your Mum didn't stop the affair after you were born. She has continued it and is continuing it now. And I mean right now, as we speak. Right now she is having sex with Deckhad, as you call him, in our own home. No, Dad, no. How could she do this to you? To us? I know she is my Mum, but right now she is just a cheating ducking slut of a bore. Megan, enough of that. Even though I agree in every way with what you just said, she is still your mother and always will be. It's okay for me to call her a cheating ducking slut of a bore, because she will soon no longer be my wife. We both looked at each other at that point, and though it wasn't my intention at the beginning of that outburst, I started laughing. Soon Megan joined in, and we laughed until the tears of mirth washed away the tears of sorrow. I think it was after the next glass of bourbon each that we again became serious. What is his name, Megs? Your Deckhad sperm donor, I mean. Do you know? Yes, Dad, I do. He is Miguel Rodriguez. His family has always been rich. Apparently, his father started a high-end car import company, and Deckhad manages it for him. Mum and him were an item in university. I think Mum smelled money at the time, but he dumped her when his family wasn't happy with his choice. They obviously never got over each other. Apart from that, there's not much to add. I know where he lives, Megs. The bastard has a wife and daughter. Son of a witch. Now I know why the daughter looked familiar. She is the spitting image of you at that age. Sorry, Megs, but you have a half-sister who looks just like you, just younger, and, by the way, she has black hair, not the brown I remember yours to be at that age. Dad, surely this day can't get any weirder. What are you going to do? I should say, what are we going to do? You're not in this alone, Dad. I know Mum cheated, is cheating on you, but she has betrayed me as well. We can't let this stand. Megs, let me sort it out. As I said before, everything is set to deal with your Mum. I will need to rethink what happens about Deckhad. Upon arriving home at the expected end of my recharge time away, Rachel greeted me with open arms. She went for the big full-body hug and mouth kiss which I rebuffed rudely. To say she was taken aback was an understatement. She physically recoiled from me and asked, "Babe, what's wrong? Has something happened?" I didn't want to reveal what I knew just yet, so I pushed the anger down, and using my best poker face, replied, "Just something at work as usual, Ratch." I thought my time away would be good for me, but now I just found out that more problems have occurred in the times I was away. After I said it, I realized what I said, so quickly added, "I mean while I was away this time. There will be quite a few things that I will need to sort out and might mean more time away. Sorry." Rachel looked at me in a quizzical way. She obviously didn't quite know how to take what I just said. Eventually, she must have settled on an innocent interpretation, probably because she and Miguel had been getting away with their infidelities for so long without suspicion. Why would today be different, right? The next few days were crazy. I tried my best to act as normally as possible, but when you feel physically sick at any hint of intimate contact, it is hard to hide that something is weird. Rachel seemed to accept my excuse of work problems as the reason for my weirdness. I had to get away again. Being close to Rachel was driving me nuts with anger. 2 days later, I made the call to go away again, pretending that this was a longer than usual stay away. Rachel accepted it as one of my usual absences, and didn't wait long to call deckhead Miguel over as usual. This time it would be different, however. As soon as he arrived at our house, in Rachel's car, I called 911, on a phone I had purchased at the local 7-Eleven. "Hi. This is John Rodriguez. I think my brother, Miguel, has been kidnapped and is being held at 25 Miles Parade. My address. Please hurry. There's a woman in the house with him and I think she is armed. Hurry. Please hurry." I hung up before the call center could start to ask identifying questions. The wait near my usual tree alcove was going to be great. It was less than 5 minutes later that I heard the sirens. I couldn't have asked for a better response. A police cruiser, an ambulance, a first response SWAT unit and, to top it all off, a roaming news crew with live broadcast capability, came to a screaming, noisy halt in front of our house. These guys, I found out later, were doing just such an exercise in a quieter part of the neighborhood when the call came in. Talk about coincidence. Heavily armed paramilitary-looking soldiers fanned out around the house, climbing the back fence as well. The camera crew caught the action live and in full color. This is going better than expected, I thought. The sirens calmed down to be replaced by a loud hailer, announcing that the police were here. The speaker requested that all occupants of the house had 20 seconds to come out of the house. Miguel Rodriguez's name was also repeated many times, and it was requested that if he was in the house, he needed to make himself known and exit through the front door. There was no exit from the front door, so the decision was made quickly for the SWAT team to enter. Stun grenades were heard, followed by smoke grenades. These guys knew their stuff. Within 20 seconds, 2 semi-naked individuals were dragged out through the front door and placed, rather roughly face down on the front lawn. Handcuffs on, they were stood up. Rachel's naked breasts were on full display, as were deckhead's goods. The TV crew were having a field day. One of the policewomen felt sorry for Rachel and offered a coat to her. Rachel gladly accepted and was seen to try to cover herself while her hands were cuffed. The coat did hide the naughty bits, but it was clear that she was as naked as daylight underneath. Nobody worried about deckhead. I wonder if anyone else would notice that he was rather lacking in the deck department. To be fair, maybe it was the situation which made his clock shy. I had to snigger. It took the police a while to ascertain the facts of the situation, and reluctantly release the 2 individuals, but the damage was done. After all of the responders had returned to base, the neighborhood was in a whirl. Gossip abounded and I had to make myself scarce in case I was identified. The fun was had. Now it was time to wait until the proverbial sheet hit the fan. Mrs. Amanda Rodriguez received an anonymous phone call to inform her that there was an interesting news broadcast on that night. The news broadcast was indeed interesting. Obviously, no bare bits were shown, but it was extremely clear that the couple wore not a stitch of clothing. The couple was identified as a Mrs. Rachel Wildthorpe and a Mr. Miguel Rodriguez. They were not husband and wife, but were found with no clothes on in the residence of the Wildthorpes. No comment was offered by the couple, except to say that the couple would be suing the authorities for wrongful arrest. "Hi Ratch," I asked as I phoned her that night. It took all of my self-control to stop from laughing as I spoke. "How was your day?" "Oh, hi Tom. It was okay. Have you seen the news yet tonight?" "No, not yet. I have some reports to finish. I'll probably get to see the late news before I crash." I wanted to drag out her anxiety by adding, "It isn't the same as our local news though." "Why? Did something happen that I should know about? This would be interesting." No not really, but we will need to talk when you get back." "That sounds ominous. Okay, I'll see you in a couple of days." Bye, and I hung up. This would ring alarm bells in Rachel's mind. I have never hung up on her. I don't know what happened in the Rodriguez household that night, but it seemed that asshole was not living there at present. Apparently he camped out at work. His father's car dealership had a fully self-contained flat attached which he now treated as his home. I knew as soon as Miguel and Rachel met up again. This time they decided that our house was not a good option, and besides, the neighbors were all now very keen to find out what was going on in the Wildthorpe household. The hotel which they chose was managed by Tom Whirls. Tom was an honest, hard-working individual who hated what his hotel was often used for. He could pick immediately a couple who were not kosher. The couple who hired a room that night did not look right. This feeling was confirmed when a well-dressed gentleman entered his office shortly after the dodgy couple went to their room. He politely asked which room the recent customers had hired. He also placed a rather large amount of money on the front counter and requested a spare key to that room. Tom was bothered by this. He was an honest man. Bribes only came back later to haunt. The well-dressed man, who then introduced himself as Roger, explained the reason for his request. Now this was a different matter. Tom agreed. The money also went into the till. The two cheaters, who were both wearing their birthday suits and engaged in the famous 6 and 9 position, were beyond surprised when their room seemed suddenly rather crowded. There was a man in a suit holding 2 manila envelopes and another man, the hotel manager, holding a video camera. This camera was a nice touch. I had offered the process server extra cash if he could get the action in digital glory. Mr. Suited Guy asked Rachel, "Are you Mrs. Rachel Wildthorpe?" All Rachel could do was nod yes while trying to cover herself. "You have been served." This was said very coldly and clinically as she was handed one of the envelopes. Before Rachel could even sob, he turned to Miguel. "Are you Mr. Miguel Rodriguez?" "Yes, I am." "What of it?" asked Cole. "You, sir, have also been served." With that, Miguel was also handed an envelope. The two extra men left the room to sounds of shouting and arguing interspersed by sobs and loud wailing. That's it for part 1, viewers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the exciting second part of this 2-part story. Stay safe and I bid you goodbye for now.